Support for Fresh Take is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming champions of the world. Manscaped offers precision engaged tools for your family jewels. Manscaped just launched their 4th generation trimmer, the Lawnmower 4.0. That's right, a 4.0. Join over 20 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer to you for 20% off and free shipping worldwide with code FTNPOD at manscaped.com. I'm one of the lucky few that have tried the new Lawnmower 4.0, and I have been blown away by the performance. Just unbelievable. The upgraded trimmer includes a multi-function on and off switch that can engage a travel lock. It also gives you the ability to turn on the 4000K, it's over 4000 LED spotlight on and off when you need a more precise shave. Did I mention wireless charging? Oh, Nelly. It's got wireless charging to make it simple and easy to charge the fantastic 4.0. Get 20% off and free shipping worldwide with the code FTNPOD at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. And use the code FTNPOD and unlock your confidence, and always use the right tools to get the job done with Manscaped.
Hey, Tales for the Sea listeners, thanks again for tuning into the show. Both Scott and I greatly appreciate your support. Once again, we would like to extend to our listeners a special offer going on with our friends at Sea of Dead Clothing. Right now, head over to their website, seaofdead.ca. Check out their entire great inventory. With the weather getting colder and colder each day, check out their great line of crew necks and hoodies, most notably the Happy Valley crew necks and the Lloyd's Roller Rink hoodies. Fully stocked. Keep yourself warm as we head into fall and winter. Also, some great new t-shirts available now as well. Night Gallery and the new Heather Brown Corral shirts. They're on sale right now. They're popular. They're stocked. Head on over to the website, seaofdead.ca, and check them out. When you're there, be sure to use the promo code Tales from the Sea, all one word at checkout. Get yourself a 5% discount. Once again, that's Tales from the Sea, all one word at checkout. Get yourself a 5% discount. Save yourself a little money. Also, brand new beer just launched from Sea of Dead at Dandy's Brewing for a limited of time. Lost Logo Lager. Be sure to head to Dandy's Brewing at 2003 11th Street Southeast. Get some right now while they're still available, as mentioned, for a limited amount of time. Once again, that's Lost Logo Lager, brought to you by Sea of Dead and available only at Dandy's Brewing, 2003 11th Street Southeast.
You are listening to the Fresh Take Network.
What it is, what it do, welcome to Fresh Take. Joshua Adamai Marbathon. I'm very, very happy to have from ESPN, Nabil Karim. Nabil, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your journey in broadcasting here today.
No worries. Thanks for having me, man.
So the one question I ask every broadcaster that ever comes on here, it's the most basic one, but for some reason it's one they never really get asked. It's, when was the point that you knew you wanted to do this thing called broadcasting?
That would probably be like in high school. When I was in high school, I grew up in Vancouver. And so growing up, I used to watch Sports Page all the time. This was a local show, which had, I mean, if you look at the talent that came out of that show, everyone went on to be really, really successful. And I used to watch a guy named Don Taylor all the time. And Don Taylor went on to work for Sportsnet for years. Just he's a local legend in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And I used to watch him, growing up. And then in high school, I was really paying attention to him, just seeing how much fun he was having. I used to watch the highlights every night. I used to watch for him and just to see how much fun he was having. It just didn't seem like a real job. And so it was probably around like that, grade 8, 9, 10 kind of time where I was really like, this is something I would love to do. I wasn't sure if it was attainable, but at the time, that's when I was like, wow, this could be something that's really cool. And just seeing how much fun Don had doing it, and knowing my love for sports, I was just like, this could go hand in hand really well if it was something that I could pursue.
And you're the same age as me. We're both 36, at least according to
I am 38. You're a young.
The internet lied to me.
Yeah.
But we're around the same age. So when we grew up, like getting that early Sportscenter or sports desk for those in Canada, that was really how you watched a lot of the highlights and engaged in the platform at that time.
Totally. I mean, those shows, it was appointment viewing, right? You go at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock, whatever it was. And that's where you get your highlights from. And, it's funny, you mentioned Sports Desk. I remember that.
Yeah.
I actually watched a lot more Sportsnet growing up. It was like Sportsnet Connected, I think it was.
Sportsnet Connected, yeah.
That was because of Don Taylor. I love Don Taylor so much that he was a guy I grew up watching. And that's kind of why I watched him a little bit more. But of course, Sportscenter in Canada.
Well, we just had the score when it literally was like, some people will remember when it was just a score. And I would remember just watching it when it was just a score.
Yeah. Are you talking about the Score Network you're talking about now?
Well, before, like, it used to just be like actual just scores before it, became the Score Network. Before that, it was just overall just scores were coming on there. And I would just watch that. And then obviously became the Score. And then they made the partnership with Sportsnet afterwards.
Yeah, the Score, another great spot where you look at the talent that's come out of that place. And the people that have moved on to different things and just done really well. It's incredible also. But yeah, I used to watch that all the time too, because that was more of a, hey, in the morning, you turn it on and you just get straight highlights. And they would do it in an entertaining way. And so, yeah, I used to love watching the Score also. And so it was just part of my fabric to always either at night check in and see what the score was and see the highlights. And then as you got busier throughout school and, your own activities in sports, and then even getting into college, university, you don't have as much time, or maybe you can't go watch, at 11 o'clock. So you watch something like the Score in the morning or what it was, Sportscenter looping. But it was definitely something I was always, really drawn into.
You got something like Cabby that was just so different than what you were getting anywhere else, right? And I thought that was the one thing with Sportsnet too. We talked about like a Don Taylor and just their overall, the way they promoted things compared to TSN at that time was completely different.
Yeah, no doubt. And Cabby was just, I mean, in our industry, Cabby, and I don't think I'm biased on this. I think what he did and what he's done is kind of revolutionary as far as
100%.
Our era of sports broadcasting. And what he was able to kind of carve out for himself and what he created, the career he's had. And it's funny when you see Cabby go to a sporting event and, for example, when I was at TSN, we go to like a Raptors game and Cabby's doing his thing and I'm doing my thing. The player is not so fond of talking to me, but when they see Cabby, because he's coming with a whole different vibe, he's going to have fun. He's not going to ask him the same sort of questions he's getting from, that we've got to ask to do our traditional stories.
Yeah.
There is just such a greater appreciation for him and the connections that he has had. And again, that's kudos to him, man. Him and his team of guys who created that show. Is Cabby on the Street? Yeah, Cabby on the Street.
Yeah, he's kind of like the original podcast almost in some ways, the way that he had the conversations with. So you're in Vancouver. Did you play any sports growing up?
I did. Basketball was my favorite sport growing up. That was the one that, failed dreams of making like the NBA and all that kind of stuff.
I hear you. Me too.
But basketball was my favorite sport growing up. So, seeing a guy like Steve Nash do really well, having the Vancouver Grizzlies in town for a while, that's still a sore subject for me. But having the Vancouver Grizzlies in for a while, Sharif Abdul, he was my favorite player throughout high school, and try to mimic his spin move all the time, even though halftime I was traveling. So Sharif, but fun. And then, kind of people like, how can you be a Raptors fan? I'm a diehard Raptor. How could you be a Raptors guy if you were a Grizzlies guy growing up? Well, I wasn't one of those guys that like Vancouver hates Toronto, Toronto hates Vancouver. I never was into that. And so, I kind of migrated to the Raptors after. But
and Vince just took over Canada. I don't think people understand that as much that are younger.
Yeah, no. And when Vince came to the league, like I was fan of both teams. You just can't. Yeah, obviously your heart's in Vancouver. You grew up there, and that's your team. But to see what the Raptors were doing, they're way more successful than the Grizzlies were. It was easy to like them too, and but basketball was so influential for me. So that was the sport that I think I wrote out the most.
Speaking on the Grizzlies, we did a pod and we went back and looked at to some of the botch of the draft picks of guys that they could have had, and just the misses, like even like the Antonio Daniels year, then they shipped him off the next year. The whole Steve Francis thing, it was just such a mismanagement of the draft when you had all these high draft picks. I'm not going to know if that's the reason they left, because the attendance obviously was high before the lockout, and that played into it, but just a lot of mismanagement of draft picks there.
It's brutal. I mean, Steve Francis, again, the guy turned out to be a phenomenal player for, a good extended period of time in the NBA, but didn't want to be there. Didn't want to be there. And you're seeing more and more now, like you want a guy who wants to be part of that franchise, right? And again, we're talking years ago now. Everything was so different. Vancouver's still a pretty fresh market in the NBA. I think, talking to people who work in the NBA now, they loved going to Vancouver.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of NBA players missed going to Vancouver as the road team. But living in Canada is different than living in the United States. And I think only, recently has it, even Toronto's still going through that. Let's be honest. Toronto's still going through that. And that's why, like someone like Kawhi Leonard, you had to trade to get him, right? To resign him. You saw how difficult that was. But I mean, that's a special situation, I guess. But just to get any free agent in Toronto, it's a lot harder. Maybe easier than it was 20 years ago. But that's the same situation for Vancouver, right? So, I mean, when you don't hit on your draft picks, that's tough. And especially when the Raptors do hit on, some of them, that's even tougher. So it is what it is, man. It's hopefully one day it goes back to Vancouver. I don't know if that'll ever happen, but I feel like they got shortchanged for sure.
I feel they're on that list, but I feel Vegas and Seattle have kind of dibs right now ahead of them. And with everything that's going on in New Orleans right now, I feel like that's probably going to be heading there sooner or later.
It makes more sense. Let's be real. Like Vegas and Seattle make a ton more sense.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
So you go to Simon Fraser. What were your years there like? And what was the decision to go to Simon Fraser first?
Yeah, so I went to SFU and I was majoring in criminology, doing a minor in communication.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I basically was following what my sister had done. My sister was by that time already in law school. And so she was a crim major, and dude, honestly, I just took the easiest path possible. That was just following hers. And listen, I was interested in law, and I was interested in criminology. I really liked the subject. I didn't love it. And it took me about a couple years to finally realize, like, shit, I'm not loving it. Like, I had that feeling in the back of my mind that I should be doing something different, or I should at least try it. Because again, like I said, I really wanted to be a broadcaster in high school. And then when it kind of got to like grade 11, 12, I kind of realized, A, at that time, a lot of people didn't look like me who were on TV. And B, you just kind of realize that it's a tough job. It's a tough gig to get into. And it still is, And so I feel a little tougher back then. And without social media, right? You can't create your own platform. But then, you fast forward a couple years in university, and I was like, it was just bugging me. And I finally had this like conversation with myself, and I had to be real with myself, and was just like, listen, I got to try doing this. And so from there, I did things like this, not a podcast, but like informational interviews where I talked to people who were successful in the industry. And how did you get there? How did you do this? And, I kind of came up with a formula of what I think I could do in order to be successful. I gave myself a 5-year plan. And that's when I kind of went to my parents and were like, hey, listen, I want to switch. Like, I'm going to finish university because I see the value in that and getting a degree and falling back on that. But I wanted to go to broadcast school, and it was a difficult conversation, trust me, especially because my parents like, broadcast, what do you mean? What about TV? Like, what does that even mean? You know what I mean? Again, in our community, we had so many people who were very successful in different things, in like medicine, we had a lot of lawyers, a lot of people in business, accountants, a lot of people in trades, like different, we just didn't have a lot of broadcasters. And so it was very foreign to them. But I think once they saw, how passionate I was, how informed I was, and when I didn't know, I made up, But they saw I had taken that initiative, and so they backed me. And again, I finished my degree at SFU, and then I went to BCIT for broadcast journalism. But I gave myself a 5-year plan. I was like, listen, that was my deal with them, was that if I'm not successful in 5 years, and that for me was being in a major market in Canada, then I would go to law school.
What was you said you kind of had like a focus on things you learned from other broadcasters and whatnot. What were some of those things that, you know, guided you along?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, and the times have changed again with social media. Like I said, you can create your own platform. You could do it differently now. You could do it differently right now, like what you were doing with the platform that you have. But back then we didn't have that, right? And so there was basically 2 avenues, right? 2 avenues. And I still think it works to this day to some degree, but everything, because of social media, because of platforms you can create now, everything's kind of shrunk, and you can do anything from basically your own house. But back then, it was either you stay in the market you're in. So that was, for me, that was Vancouver, and you kind of work behind the scenes. You know, you do the prompter, you take any job you can, be a writer, do whatever, research, and then you kind of work your way up in the newsroom and let it be known that you want to be on air one day. And that's how you do it. I wasn't willing to do that because I knew that process takes way longer. Like it's just, you kind of, and now you hear sometimes in broadcast school, and it's just not true, or it's not commonplace where, you know, the news director at CTV Vancouver is going to be like, hey man, our main sports anchor, our 6 o'clock sports anchor is sick today. Let me go get that guy who's in research out of school, because I know he wants to be a sports anchor. Let him fill in. Not going to happen. Not happening. Not in a big market. In a small market, that's different. That could happen. And that's why I got the advice from so many people. It's like, go to a small market, get a job on air. Hang on, wait, get a job on air, go out there, make that sacrifice, because they're going to let you do a ton of things. You're going to make mistakes, and you want to make mistakes out there rather than make a bigger mistake in Vancouver and kind of, you know, your career is kind of shot. So that's what I did. I waited for a job out of school. I graduated in April, May. I didn't get a job till October, but that's because I was waiting for an on-air job. And then I moved to Prince George, and that was my first on-air job. And also, I wasn't just looking in sports. That's advice I got was, hey, look into news. Like, I know, again, the scene has changed quite a bit. I don't know what it's like anymore in Canada as far as like local news, but at that time, you know, you had a 6 o'clock sports anchor, maybe a noon, maybe 1 or 2 noon guys, maybe a couple weekend guys. So I got 5, 6 jobs maybe per station for the bigger stations. But for news reporters and news anchors, there's way more jobs. So the idea was just get on air. Just get on air. You can always make the switch over. It's very easy to kind of make that switch and make it known when the job comes up or whatever through networking. But that was it for me. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take a job, move away if I have to a small town, and also, again, be on air. And I was a news reporter. That was my first job. I did radio and TV.
Wow. And you're not wrong. In Canada, I almost find it harder to be a sports reporter, which is why when I've talked to students about stuff, I mean, I've gone a harder path of working for the Dinos and doing play-by-play and that. But even if you're doing that, you're so right, you have to do the news side. And in Canada now, like this past May, they axed, I think it was like 6 TSN radio stations and a bunch of Sportsnet stations. So those avenues are fewer and far between. So that news avenue is one, like you're saying, with the smaller stations, it seems like that still is the right path to go on to.
And you know, one thing too that I didn't realize until I got there, actually until I left, was that learning how to construct a really good news story will make you so much better than any sports story you're going to construct. You know, especially in your early stages, because a sports story is it's very much a formula, right? Like, I think anyone could really do it. Listen, there are some really good ones obviously out there. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying for the most part, it's a formula. Whereas news stories, they can be complex, they can be different. There's a lot more storytelling involved, you know, playing to sound and so forth. There's not much wallpapering going on as far as the visuals are concerned. So I think those were really valuable lessons for me to learn when I was in Prince George and trying to figure out how to write the pictures and do all these sorts of things that I could bring. So when I got to CBC and when I got to TSN and now ESPN, and so you kind of understand those things. And I'm glad that I took that route to start a news first and, you know, get those opportunities, because otherwise I don't know if I would have been able to be as effective as I was eventually, because I sucked right away, but eventually, you know, leaving Prince George.
Well, and having that news background too, as we've just seen from the last 2 weeks of sports, right? I mean, even on Sportscenter, you're talking about the Blackhawks, you're talking about Henry Ruggs. These are real life situations that have a more of a news element than a sporting element to it. So to have that background, you're prepared to cover those more serious stories. And we're seeing more and more of those serious stories sneak into the sports world.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I had this conversation with one of our producers the other day. It feels like a weekly, sometimes daily thing where we're getting stories that are more news focused, but that's the world we live in. And, you know, these stories have to be told, and, you know, it's not as cheery, obviously, but, you know, they're important. And so, yeah, you're right. Like, news and sports are really coinciding right now.
Yeah. And I think it's part of reality of everything, right? Of those things banding together and having some of those real things leak into sports. So, so you go from Prince George to CBC. What was that transition like, and how did that come about?
Well, I actually went from Prince George to Winnipeg. I was in Winnipeg.
Oh, to Winnipeg. Okay.
Winnipeg for about 8 months, and then I went to CBC. So I was Prince George about 7-8 months. I think Winnipeg was 8-9 months roughly, and then I got my big break in Toronto, where I was at CBC. I was there for about a year and a half, 2 years roughly, and then I went to TSN. So, I mean, listen, I'll always remember, people talk about getting your big, I'll always remember the phone call I got from the HR manager at CBC when I was in Winnipeg. And it was like a 4-month audition process. I'd gone down there twice for an audition. And, you know, you got to wait. And there was like 100 plus applicants for this job. And it was for a job called Hockey Night in Canada Online. Again, there was nobody doing online shows back in the day, but they were kind of ahead of the curve in that sense. And so that was the show we were going to be doing. I was going to be hosting. And I still remember, I just remember the feeling. It's very emotional. You know, I was on the phone. I was like, oh my God, I made it. Because you sacrifice so much, right? Like, you sacrifice moving 2 different cities, you leave your friends, your family, you're missing events, you're missing, you know, life events, right? Social events, and just relationships, right? However, when you get that call and you realize, again, the sacrifice you put into it and the hard work, I work way harder then than I've ever done now. There's no doubt about that. I worked way harder back then. There was gratification for sure. So I remember that phone call more than I remember the call going to ESPN.
Wow.
And just because that one meant the most to me, knowing that, you know, people would say, like, kind of second guessing my choice of doing this. And I remember telling, like, you know, even some friends, and then the look you get, it's like, you're doing what? Like, you know, you're leaving law, like, and so to get that first big break, never forget it.
Before that, I know you had that 5-year plan. Was there points before CBC happened where you were like, man, I don't know, maybe I will have to fall back into the criminology side of things because I don't know if I am going to be able to get to this point?
Yeah, dude, I doubted myself a lot. You know, I think I wish, you know, I have some colleagues that I used to have and some that I have, and people you come across and you see, like, ego, you know, the confidence and the ego kind of mixed together. And sometimes, you know, for me, that doesn't really connect, but sometimes I'm envious, man, because I wish I was a little stronger mentally and a little more confident in myself. And we all have our own struggles and our own battles and stuff. But, like, there were times when I was in Prince George, like, what am I doing? Like, why did I do this? And there were other times when I got to Winnipeg, same sort of thing. I thought I was going for a job. It wasn't even close to the job that I thought I was going for, and the support system I had there. And just like, there were tough days, man, tough days. And so that's why I said, when I get that phone call, and I've always, I think, been hired on potential. It wasn't until I got to ESPN where I think they hired me because I was good. But other than that, it's always been on potential. And even ESPN, partly potential. Like, you obviously got to get better. But that was the call that it just kind of was like, okay, I did it. I made it to a certain degree. And again, it was just instant gratification, and it put to rest some of those doubts. But it doesn't make you forget, because that's part of the journey, right? And I'm kind of glad that I went through all that. You know, I look back on it and I don't really talk about it unless we do something like this.
Yeah.
But, you know, these are conversations I'm going to have with my kids one day, that not everything is easy. And, you know, when you do make a certain level of whatever kind of goal that you have, or you know, achieve whatever type of goal it is, I mean, I don't know, there is more gratification when you can say that, you know, not that everyone doesn't work hard, but that you worked hard, got some luck, but you also had to make some sacrifices along the way. And I think it just makes for a better story. And I don't know. I guess I wouldn't trade my experiences, even though, you know, some of them there were some dark days, that's for sure, man.
They definitely bind you. And I think that the going away, going to these different cities for the broadcasting side of that, it makes you definitely a stronger person from talking to colleagues and hearing your story about it. I think that's kind of the journey to the ultimate goal of everything.
Yeah. And, you know, I look back and like one of my best friends, I met him in Winnipeg, like, best friends to this day. I would have never met him. And I just had this conversation maybe 2 weeks ago with somebody. Like, one of my best friends, I introduced him to this other guy, and we're talking. He's like, "Yeah, he's such a great guy." I'm like, "Dude, this is one of my best friends." And then I thought about it, I'm like, dude, I would have never met this guy if I didn't go to Winnipeg. And, you know, your life could be so different. If I didn't go to Toronto, I mean, I love Toronto. I associate myself with Toronto, even though I grew up in Vancouver. And I have such strong roots in Toronto, and the people I met, you know, it's part of your journey. It's really part of your journey. I think that's kind of the beauty of it. When you're in it, and, you know, you might be struggling, things might be difficult, you don't see the bigger picture, but that's part of life, man. That's really part of life. And, you know, sometimes you got to take a step back. You got to take a step back and appreciate what you have. I heard this line from Jalen Rose. Listen, I don't know if Jalen came up with this.
Jalen claims he comes up with a lot of things, like all kids now named Jalen.
Right. Yeah. But I think he came up with it. I'm just gonna say I heard it from him first. Yeah. And I've been living by it for a while now, since my TSN days, mid TSN days. Appreciate your position while plotting your promotion.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great way to kind of live your life, kind of live your work life. And it's hard sometimes because you get caught up in this, right? Like, you get caught up in what you're doing in the day to day, but sometimes you got to take a step back, especially since I've been here, trying to do that a little bit more, because even to get caught up in, like, even my move from TSN to ESPN, like, that was pretty significant, I think, for a Canadian coming over. It doesn't happen too often. They hadn't hired, you know, a bunch of years from Canada, and they hadn't hired somebody in a bunch of years for Sportscenter. So, but everything just happened so quickly, and, like, you know, you don't take the time to appreciate it, and you think, I'll appreciate it later on down the line, but later on down the line never really comes, right? And so, I'm trying a little bit more, just to take a few moments here or there to kind of just appreciate, you know, what you have, and you know, your situation, and, you know, it comes with family and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's one of those wild rides, right? It kind of goes up, it goes down for everybody, and just, you kind of have to maybe sometimes kind of take a step back.
I think you hit on the appreciated, especially with this broadcasting. I know this is your interview, not to make it with myself, but I recently had the ability to do PA at McMahon Stadium this week. And it was just like, wow, I'm here doing this. Like, holy crap, like, there's only a handful of people to be able to do this.
Yeah.
And you really want to take in those moments because of all the work that leads you to get to that point. And I don't think a lot of the time in anything we do, but I think in broadcasting too, talking to colleagues, they don't take those moments in to appreciate some of those little times.
100%. Congratulations on that. That is huge.
Thanks.
You know, that is a big moment in your career. Who knows where that leads to down the line. But in the moment right now, that is a huge moment, and you should appreciate it, and you should celebrate it the way you want to celebrate it. But also know that you got to build off of it, right?
Yeah.
But again, I can see it being very easy for you to be like, okay, I got it. Okay, I got to focus on, like, being really good at this.
I got that Kobe in me. Job's not finished.
Yeah, and that's great. That's great. I'm not saying, hey, you should appreciate and just celebrate, like, have this huge, massive ego and be like, oh, shit.
Yeah. Oh,
it's more like, okay, we did this. We achieved this goal. Now, where can we take it from here? Take that minute to be like, okay, you know, like a pat on the back, whatever it is that you need to do for yourself to be like, okay, cross it off a list. I used to write a lot of lists, cross it off the list. That's my moment of appreciation. Now we move on. Let's get up to the next thing that we got to get to.
So when you did Hockey Night in Canada online, like you said, that was relatively new sphere going into that. And now obviously so many different things are online and digital and all that. What was the atmosphere and the idea of it going into it?
Yeah, it was just a daily show that we did, I think at 1:00 in the afternoon. And you know what? The streaming numbers were really good at that time. It was crazy. I didn't think, and when we went into the playoffs, oh my God, our numbers were really good. Like we were getting more numbers on that show than some of our TV shows would get. So, the idea was just to get out there, to talk hockey under the brand of Hockey Night in Canada. We would preview the shows coming up. And again, stuff like what's happening on podcasts these days, basically. And I think just looking back on it, it was such a phenomenal idea. It went on well after I left. I don't know if they do it anymore, but I thought at the time, for me, that'll always be special. Well, whether or not it was, the best product or not, it'll always be special just because that was the opportunity to get into the door there. And then also while I was there, I was doing sports highlights on CBC News Network.
Nice.
A great opportunity to work with, some phenomenal broadcasters at CBC and kind of learn. And I was raw and young and not ready for it, again, hired on potential. And so it was a lot of learning done in that first year. I got to host the FIFA World Cup post-game show.
That's amazing.
TV, which was I never hosted anything in my life. I'd never hosted. I didn't like my idea of a dream job at that time was being a reporter on the sidelines or at the rink or whatever. And I remember my boss telling me, he's like, hey, I got a bit of a soccer background. Can you host this post-game show? Because we had the rights for the 2010 World Cup. Can you host this thing like a Hockey Night Canada online show? No problem. Yeah, I could do it. And this is like, I got hired in April. The World Cup's in June, I think, right? And no problem. And then he's like, all of a sudden, he's like, a couple weeks later, he's like, oh, it's actually going to be on Bold, which was CBC's like secondary channel at the time. Nobody's got Bold, so whatever, right? And then it was like a week before where he's like, hey, you're actually going to be on the main network.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, what? And dude, I have never sweat through so many shirts in my life.
I bet, yeah.
But I was lucky, man. I had Steve Armitage, who is a legend in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first met him, I was going to shit my pants because he is this brash, big dude. And he's intimidating. But Steve was the nicest man in the world without me even asking. He took me under his wing, gave me great advice. He was such a great person to me while I was at CBC, especially during that tournament. I got to work with Dick Howard, a whole bunch of different great people while I was at CBC. So I was very lucky to get that opportunity. It was a kind of sink or swim moment. And, I made it above shore and, I kind of went, frankly, pretty well for somebody who had no experience. I look back at it now, 100 times better, but I was, 25, 26 at that time with no experience. And so
getting to do the World Cup.
Yeah. Like 2 million people coming out watching, so it's a lot of people. Like that's probably the most that ever watched me in anything.
Yeah.
And so, but I just like so appreciative of a guy like Steve, and I've seen him very, not as often as I'd like over the years. We used to text quite a bit, but often enough. And again, that guy has just provided so much knowledge for me, and for him to be a guy who provided so much support. I'll never reach his status of legend in Canada, obviously.
Yeah.
But that's just a reminder of paying it forward to the next person, right? Just to pay it forward. And if someone else needs the help, go out there and do what you can to help them, like Steve did for me.
And then what led from the CBC to get to TSN?
I wanted more opportunity, and I just networked, and TSN had an opening at the time. James Sabalski was moving to radio,
right?
James is a Vancouver guy, so if you're on the West Coast, you know him. And they had an opening on Sportscenter, and I just sent my demo in, talking to a guy that I'd been talking to for a couple of years, and just to keep in touch. Sent it to the VP. They honestly, I think I sent it to them on like a Thursday or something. On a Friday, I got a note saying, "Hey, why don't you come audition?" auditioned the next week, and then kind of went from there. So yeah, it was just, again, going from doing like 2 to 3 minute highlights on CBC News Network in the morning, doing this online, to now like doing a Sportscenter, an hour-long plus 2-hour-long show, depending what it is. And now you're, again, higher to potential, getting your feet wet, getting thrown into it. And so, you know, it was difficult at first, you know, just to kind of you just wanted to be comfortable, right? And kind of wanted to be part of it. And again, I had so many great teammates at TSN, so many great producers, people behind the scenes that helped me out. But it was honestly just wanting more opportunity. And that's why there's nothing better than TSN in Canada.
That's where I first really noticed you. It was on the March Madness side. And for me, just being a baller and everything like that. And no, all respect to, like, there's great staff here, but like sometimes on the basketball broadcast in Canada, it lacks a little bit for knowledge. I was like, oh, this guy actually knows what he's talking about during March Madness, finally, and someone that knows what they're talking about, because you go to those panels and you're switching to the games all the time, right? I'm like, oh, here's someone that knows how to host this situation correctly and knows what's going on with all the games and the players.
I appreciate that. I really do, man, because there's a ton of prep in March Madness.
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous amount of prep, and it's not like the other sports there. Sometimes like hockey, where we got like research teams helping you out. There was nobody. And so you're doing your own research, and that was a lot of research because, yeah, you know, stuff about some of the bigger teams, but to get into the nitty gritties, like, you know, the 64th ranked team or whatever it is, you know, mid-level team, mid-major teams, it's a lot of work. So I appreciate that. That's what it came across as. I love doing it. The first year was crazy because again, the traffic is insane. Got 5 feeds going. And I always tell my producer, I'm like, dude, just tell me, be like simple, stupid with me. We're going from TSN 3 to TSN 1. This is your game. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, and at one point I was like, stop telling me what network we're going to. Like, just keep it as simple as possible, the communication, because it was wild. And then like, okay, which halftime are we in right now? Because we're just bouncing around. You're not really watching games, to be honest.
Yeah.
So the first run was difficult because it was like, I'd never seen traffic like this. And it gets better as the tournament goes on because less teams.
Yeah.
But you know, the second and third year I did it. I love doing it. Working with Leo and Jack's. I love Jack.
Yeah. Leo, what's that energy like? Because it just feels like he just screams energy that is just contagious.
Yeah, he's so passionate. You know, he's so passionate. I love the fact that he's got the passion for Canada. He's got the passion for basketball. You know, he's got the passion for Brooklyn, which, we went to the NBA draft together in Brooklyn, and he showed me around, you know, which was really cool just to be in his hometown. Leo's another great individual, man. Just another guy who, when I was doing Raptors broadcast, just such a nice dude.
Canadian royalty, basketball wise.
I grew up watching that dude, like on TV, him, Rod Block, you know, doing Grizzlies games. And, you know, again, you're fresh and you're doing these Raptors games. And at that time, like, honestly, they didn't care, you know. And so I'm coming on, and Leo and these guys are just so good. They're so good, and they make you feel so comfortable. And I have so much respect for that. I love just doing Raptors games. I really, really love doing Raptors games. And so that was just honestly a real joy to be able to do that, to do March Madness. And then Sam Mitchell comes in the mix, and I was amazing dynamic with him just right away, where, you know, he would shit on me all the time, and it was hilarious. And I even remember I went to a restaurant, I had Milestones or something, and this was during the tournament, and we go, and this server comes and whatever, eating, and then when the bill comes, he goes, "Hey, can I ask you one question?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Why does Sam hate you so much?" And it was so funny because that's what he came across on TV, but it was awesome because we play it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And Sam's been a huge mentor to me. He's been incredible. So that whole basketball side, man, just so much fun. So if it came across that way, I'm happy because I loved doing basketball.
Ballers recognize ballers. I've always said, just being in Basketball Canada, and, you know, when we're growing up, it's still very limited, right? And now it's growing so much, right? The women are killing it. Disappointed Olympics, unfortunately, with Coach Tomitis and them, but it's just growing so much now, where we see, you know, SGA and Lou Dort, and Duarte right now is one of the leaders for Rookie of the Year right now on the Pacers. He's killing it. you're seeing the growth. And even for the Raptors, like you were talking about, players didn't want to go there. And now Scotty Barnes is super happy to just be a Raptor and not go anywhere else. You're really seeing that. And you got to kind of be, I think, a big part of that before you went to ESPN. You got to kind of be that part of that Raptors team growing and the game really growing.
Yeah. And I left the year they won the championship.
Yeah. So, I was going to bring that up. Yeah.
It was covering them all those years, and they weren't good. And then they got really good, and then they couldn't get out of the playoffs, or they couldn't get deep enough in the playoffs. So it was always tough. And I was me and Nick Stauskas, which Nick's another great individual.
Soft Castillo.
Yeah. We have a great friendship, and I thought we did a really good job together on air. But he's for a guy who's like not a broadcaster,
him and Kia, I thought nailed it.
Yeah, he's great too. Yeah.
Players. Yeah.
And so who knows down the line what they want to do, but I think you go down that line and you're like, okay, you had all these years doing it, and then all of a sudden the Raptors get really good, and they get Kawhi, and then you're not broadcasting, you're not doing Raptors games, and then I moved, and it was kind of cool though to see it from the ESPN angles. I got here right as they're making the playoffs, and people still counting them out, and to see them win here was really cool. Actually, like I was at Game 5 of the final.
Nice.
And so it was nice because with 3 minutes left, I thought they were going to win the championship, and I liked the hall pass to stay out all night and party and whatever. My wife's like, yeah, just have a great time. We just had a baby at that time. Like my daughter was 4 days old or something like that.
Oh, wow.
But me and my friend went to the game and didn't work out, but pretty special moment. But yeah, just to see it kind of rise and then peak at that time. I kind of wish I was covering it, but at the same time, I had bigger things going.
Yeah, I just getting that ability, we talked having basketball as your favorite sport and then getting to cover it all these years. In your time, really just the basketball side, who's been your favorite person you've got to like either just interact on the side or got to interview?
It's usually guys that are like not the superstars.
Yeah.
Although when I say that, DeMar DeRozan was the best guy to deal with. I mean, and DeMar was a superstar or a star.
Yeah.
And he was phenomenal, man. Dude, the guy there's a reason why, he has such a close connection to Toronto and to the media in Toronto. And he's a phenomenal player. And I'm so glad to see what's happening for him in the Bulls right now and how well.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
But at the same time, what he meant to the city, him resigning in Toronto was just a massive point for the franchise. Like he could have left, went to LA or wherever he wanted to go. But he stayed in Toronto. And so I see why people were so upset when he got traded for Kawhi. They had forgotten how good Kawhi was because he was out for a year before that or something.
Yeah.
So I say just dealing with DeMar was it was always good. Like he was always there. He'd answer your questions. He's not going to duck you. And, for the most part, really respectful. So I think he's a guy that I look back on. And I think again, I wasn't in there day in, day out.
Yeah.
But when I was there doing broadcasts and then, sometimes reporting, DeMar was always phenomenal. So I'm a big fan of him still. And I hope he does really well.
On the Sportscenter side, what was it like? You said, you went from doing these highlights, this little packages, to doing a whole Sportscenter. What is that whole process like?
It's a lot more preparation, obviously, right? Especially when you come to like Sportscenter here, where we do tons of breaking news. There's a lot more college sports, which we don't do as much in Canada.
No.
And so it's just a lot more preparation, right? Making sure you kind of know what's going on. And kind of knowing, the main figures, the names, some of the history. I mean, it's only so much you can know, but you got to know something about everything.
Yeah.
It's kind of, and if you don't, you got to fake it, right? Because you can't know everything about everything. You can't be interested in everything.
No.
You got to fake it then, or know enough to get by. But it was just the length of the shows, the direction, communication, because you work with different producers, some you mesh better with, some with better communication. And so you'll have your favorite producers that you work with. But yeah, it was just kind of getting used to a show not being, a segment not being 2 to 3 minutes, but our segments now, our blocks, as we call them, are like 12, 15 minutes long, depending on the show, right? So you kind of got to go longer. When you do 6 o'clock at TSN, I don't know what it is now, but when we were at 6 o'clocks before, it's a solo show, right? So you could be on for an hour and a half by yourself.
Yeah.
I've had to do 2 or 3 of them here at ESPN, usually at Christmas time, that time when there's nobody wants to work.
Yeah.
And so those are challenging. It can be challenging, especially like, breaking news, or you're doing lots of interviews, pre-tapes, this, that. The pace is just different. Put it that way.
Well, and I was going to ask, like, what's the biggest stark difference with ESPN and TSN? But the one thing is, you definitely sometimes have like those side chats, right, where you're not at the desk. It seems that TSN doesn't do those as much.
We interview a lot more people live here.
Yeah.
Way more people live for ESPN. And we're reacting to everything. I think it's big. We're going to react to. We do a lot of those side chats. You're right. The set here is phenomenal. It's beautiful. I mean, I've never seen anything like it compared. But again, it's not fair to compare it to anything else because it's ESPN, and ESPN is ESPN. But it's really neat what we can do here. I would say we do a lot more breaking news. The late night show is not as much breaking news, but I was doing, the mornings and the afternoons for a while, just kind of slotting you everywhere, and you got to be ready. You got to be ready to that rundown out the window. If something happens, we're going live with it, and we're going to stick with it depending on how big the story is. So really have to be prepared. We have great research departments here, great support staff here at ESPN, where they really will support you and help you out and what you need. If you need a stat here or there, for the most part, you're going to get it right away. So the support here is great. That really helps everybody. It's an entire production. It's not just 2 people, not the 2 anchors, and not just the anchor and the analyst. It's a whole team behind that's working together. And if everyone's kind of cohesive and everyone's supporting each other, that's when we get those great shows. So I think it's really, really important. It's such a team, right?
What led from going from TSN to ESPN in 2019?
Same thing, more opportunity.
Yeah.
I had this guy reach out to me and he was interested, and I had never thought about going to ESPN. TSN was always a dream. I was there, was having a great time. But I knew I could do more. Where can you do more? South of the border, where ESPN has just such a big platform, and this is a whole different market out here. And not a lot of people do it. Not a lot of Canadians do it. I look at a guy like Adnan Virk. I relied on him a lot, asking him questions about his journey, and he's been so successful, and he is just so good at what he does. I'm not even close to being as good as Adnan, but getting advice from him, he was massive for me as I decided, if I wanted to do this or not. And again, it just came down to opportunities. I knew I had more opportunities out here. I knew I could do more that I couldn't do at TSN, and that's why I made the switch.
How many Canadians are there? Is it just you and Arda, or is there somebody else there that's Canadian?
On air?
On air, yeah.
At Sportscenter, just me and Arda.
Yeah.
Just me and Arda on Sportscenter, but we had like Barry Melrose is Canadian.
Right. Yeah, the hockey platform must have just changed everything there.
Yeah, now we got a lot of Canadians as far as Kevin Weeks there and Cassie Campbell Pascal, and there's some Ray Ferraro's there now, and it's sort of like certain side projects. But as far as Sportscenter, it's just me. Arda's been there for a little bit now.
Yeah.
And we have some Canadians sprinkled around ESPN. Don't get me wrong, there's other Canadians there. I just don't know how many on-air Canadians that we have.
What's is there any times Americans bust the Canadian balls there about stuff?
Accent.
All the time. Yeah.
What are you talking about? And then
I never get that. I never get this accent thing.
I didn't hear it until recently when I listened to some podcasts, some hockey podcasts.
Okay.
And, I do hear it now.
Okay.
I've been told from my colleagues I don't have a crazy Canadian accent. It's pretty low key. But then I hear some of these other podcasts. I guess now being here long enough, 2.5 years, that I hear the American accent, and it's become normal. And now I can hear the Canadian accent. So I do hear it. I don't think it's as pronounced as people say, but that's just just gotta defend my people, man.
What was it like moving to Bristol and then driving up to the building that first day?
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Yeah, it was again one of those moments of excitement, nervousness. gratification, like I told you, just another one of those moments where you remember, you're like, okay, this is super cool. Like I remember going in for my audition. I auditioned about a year before I got the job, maybe less than a year before I got the job, because there was no job at the time. They just wanted to see how I would do an audition. And I took a picture beside that iconic Sportscenter sign that they have inside the building, the one with all the lights. It's that like old school ESPN sign. And the lady's like, "Oh, you want to take a picture with it?" I'm like, "I might not ever come back here." And so
Yeah.
I didn't think I was getting a job there because I just came to audition. I was like, I'm probably not coming back. I want to show my son that I came here, you know?
Yeah.
And so I took a photo there. And I saw that photo. I think it's my profile photo, I think, for like Instagram. But yeah, I mean, that's another moment I remember. It's just where it's like, okay, you've kind of crossed off one and now you're on to the next goal. So I think it's just motivational at times too. Again, there's excitement, there's all sorts of range of emotion, but definitely a cool moment to realize that you're starting a new chapter.
What's the sports team bias there? Like, obviously, have you kind of wiped out like any rooting interest for teams and just kind of focused on news, or do you still kind of in your side kind of have some of those sports biases?
They're pretty cool about here. About like,
Yeah,
at TSN, it was like you don't want to tell anyone you like whatever hockey team because everyone's just always on you, right?
yeah,
And they're like, oh, you're so biased. You like the Leafs, or kind of whatever it is, right? Where here, it's like I was pretty quiet about who I liked, and then they're like, hey man, like the Raptors are gonna win the NBA championship. You can be cool. You can like say you like the Raptors. It's cool.
yeah.
Like you're a fan. That's why you're here, right? And so now I'm just open about the Blue Jays and the Raptors and hockey. I'm still kind of whatever any kind of Canadian team does well. I always shout out Canadian players whenever they do well. So
Of course.
just go around me, you're like, okay, that's enough now, guy. That's enough. But yeah, I mean, I think I represent Canada pretty well. And but as far as my teams are concerned, yeah, you can be a fan here. And when the Raptors do well, I'm extra excited in the highlights. Sometimes the producer's like, all right, tone it down, sarcastically, obviously. But you can tell when it's my team that I'm a lot more excited, and they're totally cool with it.
What was your biggest surprise getting into ESPN? Something you didn't realize and then kind of hit you when you started there?
I mean, just how big it is.
Yeah.
Especially like it's a campus of like, I think it's like 17 buildings on campus or something like that. And, we kind of base ourselves out of like 4 of them. Some of them are all like office buildings and so forth. But it's huge. And when I first got there prior to the pandemic, it was buzzing, man. I think like I saw one number was like 4,000 employees at Bristol, but before pre-pandemic, I don't know if that's currently the case. Now it's obviously very different. People working from home and there's a lot less people, but it was cool. It felt like being at BCIT, to be honest. It felt like you were at a school campus, and it was really neat because the first 3 months I was here on my own, and my family was still in Toronto. My wife was still pregnant, and I spent a lot of time on campus. Walking around, eating, researching. I did all my stuff there because it's really nice. It's just so different than coming from the studio at Channel 9 Court in Toronto, in Scarborough for TSN. It's just different, right? And this was a cool place to hang out in. So just a vast scope of everything. They gave me 3 weeks just when I first got here just to take it all in. Because it's big, man. It's big, and there's, again, like I said, so much support that you can have, things you just never know are at your disposal. And so they were really cool about just kind of easing you in and just kind of getting comfortable with how big and how things kind of work here at ESPN.
So you mentioned the pandemic. Woj drops the bomb, and the whole Rudy Gobert game happens that day and everything like that. And then the next few months happen with everything. What was that day like at ESPN for you? And then kind of the prior months with everything going on?
Yeah. So that day I was on SportsCenter, me and John Anderson. So SVP came up first. He was one who dealt with all that breaking news, and we were up right after SVP. And I remember watching the game, kind of like, oh, what's going on? And then you kind of realize things get more serious. And again, this is pre-pandemic, so we're working in this area called screening, where everyone's watching all the games and cutting highlights and so forth. And there was like a crazy buzz that started happening, and it started getting a little more raucous. And everyone was like, okay, we got to dial in here because something special, like not something special, but something out of the ordinary is happening here. and this is going to be a big story. And then SVP went on first, we came on after, and it was, we had no idea how life-altering things were going to be, but everything did change after that. The campus went quiet, shows went down, and I mean, the rest of the world shut down. So really, as we all know, things really changed after that.
Just a few last questions here. Just obviously, I can't mention ESPN without Stephen A. Smith. Have you had any interactions with Stephen A?
No, because he's always working out of the New York studios.
Right. Okay.
Rarely in Bristol. I think he used to be in Bristol a lot more. I think now he's just based out of New York, and First Take's out of New York. They got a great studio, I think, at Seaport there. So I have not really had any interactions with him besides, interviewing him on Sportscenter post game, NBA playoff kind of thing. Guy's a machine, man. The guy's he works his tail off. Everyone talks about his salary, but he works his tail off, and he's everything. He's the hardest worker, or one of the hardest workers in the building. And so, he's, like I said, he's a machine.
You mentioned some of the personalities you got to work at the other, with Jack and Leo and everyone. Who's some of your favorite personalities that you've been able to work with at ESPN so far?
It's a lot, man. And they're also different. Like all the guys that work at night are so great. John Anderson's really funny. Bucci's hilarious. Michael Lee's just cool. It's a cool cat. Kenny Mayne was hilarious. Kenny Mayne, just like, I can't believe he just said that. The dry humor, he was just so funny. And then, you work with other people throughout the day. Like I've just worked with so many different anchors. And the cool thing about this spot, everyone's the best of the best. And everyone makes, knowing that I was new, whoever I worked with, they would make you feel welcome, make you feel comfortable, and make you look good too. Zubin Mehenti's a guy who I work with a lot. Zubin is maybe the best at trying to make the other person look just as good as him. There's sometimes Zubin will say, as you know, Nabil, and I actually didn't know what he was talking about, but he will say that, sometimes just to bring you into the conversation or to add some more credibility to you. And he's the ultimate teammate. This guy knows more than anybody I've ever met in my life as far as sports is concerned. He's so smart. But we have just so many people like that throughout our platforms. So I've been really lucky to just be able to work with people like that on Sportscenter. Barry Melrose has been amazing, for hockey prior to us getting the rights. We used to do In the Crease all the time. Just have a great time with him. He's just a great dude, great person. Just, you're real hardcore hockey guy. And, I'd heard so many great things about him. I'd never met him. And we worked together, and instantly we had great chemistry. And that's just because he's just a good person. He understands good TV.
So the last two questions here. Number one, what's the next checklist that you got something you want to cover?
Something I want to cover. I'd like to get in on the NHL. Some NBA. I think those are my two favorite sports, which is kind of funny because that's an odd combination for a broadcaster in America to say your two favorite sports are the NHL and NBA.
Yeah.
So, getting in more on that and trying to own that space, even on SportsCenter a little bit, when we get NHL coverage, trying to do a little bit more stuff like that. But I don't know, this place is always humming, man. And so you just got to continue to get better. And like I said, a guy like Stephen A works so hard. There's just so many examples of people like that who are doing multiple things here at SportsCenter, at ESPN. And that's why they're so successful. I could name a laundry list of them. And so I just look at them and they're motivating just to see. So for me, when an opportunity comes up, I usually just take it. I rarely, and that's my advice to anybody, don't say no to an opportunity. Don't feel like you're not ready. You can get ready. You can prepare and get ready. But once you pass up on an opportunity, that's, it's hard to come by a second time.
You kind of asked one of my final questions there is what your advice to broadcasters. So I'll ask you my fun question. You have two kids.
Yeah.
What's the Disney benefits like?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. Now here's the thing. Because of the pandemic, we haven't gone to Disney World. I get free passes for Disney World for the family. Have not been able to.
So I heard that. I wanted to confirm it as a Disney fan.
Yeah. You get certain passes a year. I don't know what it's at right now, but I think you get 2 to 4 passes a year. for your immediate family. Okay, I have not been able to use that, unfortunately. Will use it hopefully soon. Now that things are getting a little bit better. Well, I shouldn't say that. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
With the numbers, but we want to be careful. Now, the thing I have used though at the Disney store with our card, you get 35% off the Disney store. That's a huge savings, dude. That is a massive savings. So we have a Disney store which actually just closed in the mall here in Connecticut, which sucks.
It sucks so much because I've been trying to get this Jasmine plush for my niece, and I can't. They closed the Disney stores in Calgary too. It's a bummer.
Yeah. So we took advantage of that big time because when you knock off the 35%, sometimes it's already on sale. You come out of that store like, what?
Yeah.
Let's right here quick. It feels like we robbed these guys for what we got. So, and Disney stuff makes great gifts. You know, people love Disney, and so. You know, when we had people who came to visit or they wanted to get gifts for other people, they'd come down with me to the store, they can get the discount and so forth. So I think that was kind of the coolest thing of as far as, you know, Disney discounts are concerned now. If I can get in the park, I don't know what the exact discount is in the park. I think it's like 50% off in the park.
Wow.
That is massive. But I have to double check what that number is. But there is a discount in the park too. So hopefully when it's safe, you know, we can take the kids down and they can enjoy it.
Well, man, thank you so much for your time. You're someone from afar as being a basketball broadcaster and trying to gain momentum in this is someone that I've really idolized. So I'm really privileged that I've been able to have the time to shoot your ear and get to talk to you.
I appreciate you, man. Keep grinding, and congratulations on, you know, being the PA announcer at McMahon Stadium. That is huge. So that's a big gig, and look forward to seeing what you got going in the future.
Perfect. Cheers and enjoy the day, people.